Maybe to summarize, like how does this new internet, the Web3 internet, differentiate from the predecessors, and what are you most excited about in this new kind of web?
Got you. So, I mean, the things that I'm most excited about are breaking down of silos. Right? David mentioned the inability to get funds moved from one bank to another in time. Many of you in this room will have been through a process of applying for a mortgage, and the time it takes to go through the multiple different intermediaries, the legal firms, the different banks, the authorities, the checks, etc., multiple weeks, if not multiple months, to be able to complete what should be a relatively simple process of, have the following checks been completed and do I have money? Right? But for some reason, these things take 3 months. The collapsing of those silos by saying, here are my credentials, here is the value in the assets that I hold, and here is the proof of ownership. If those things are in place, the transaction can happen within seconds. And so the collapsing of those silos is very interesting to me. That's the mundane part of Web3, I think, is fixing what is broken today. The applications we already know today, or the business processes, B2B or B2C. And I know you're going to talk about the industrial side of the metaverse, which is probably much larger in terms of opportunity now, in terms of efficiency gain. Then you've got the bring your own side of Web3, which is bring your own credentials, ownership, management of your own assets, being able to have self-custody of assets, being able to move your air miles, your training credentials, your experience as a developer, the clout you have, just the value that you have around with you. I'll give you an example of this one. Did you know it's possible today, if you're a gold status member on one airline, you can go to a different airline and say, hey, I'm a gold member on British Airways. I would like you to treat me as a gold member on Qatar Airways. Lufthansa, I don't know, I haven't tried it yet, but there are some airlines who will recognize your status and say, actually, you're a frequent flyer. You probably spend a lot of money on flights. You expect a certain level of service. We'd love your business. You can have a gold status on our airline. Right? Not many people know that that's possible today. But imagine that that status could carry with you digitally from one application to another, from one business to another. What, instead of marketing and trying to spend marketing money, firing it out and hoping you find that wealthy, well-traveled, international business person. They come to you and say, hey, I've got these credentials. I'm the customer you want. And those businesses can start applying discounts, value directly to you because of the status you've accrued. And that's not gated by LinkedIn or Facebook or anybody else. Those are credentials you've earned and that are linked to your wallet. Completely flips marketing on its head and allows the customer to bring themselves digitally with a portfolio of their experience or their achievements or their wealth directly to a business. And that, I think, can be hugely powerful.
Yeah, and you mentioned a very important term, which is ownership. So Web 1 is often referred to as write internet. The Web 2 is often a read-write, and then Web 3 is often defined as read-write-own. Can you maybe dive in a little deeper, David, on what does ownership mean? What is this real transition between Web 2 and Web 3 if we talk about ownership?
Yeah, well, if we think about what when we say ownership, what we're really talking about is we're talking about data, and who controls that data, and where does it live, and where does it move to, and so one of the limitations of kind of Web 1 and Web 2 technology is other people own, control, decide, and dispossession of your data. Even under GDPR, which gives certain sort of freedoms around your data, you're still at the mercy of these very large platforms. And so in a Web 3 world, you now regain that control, that ownership over your data, whether it's your personal health data or it's corporate data, right? There are a lot fewer protections around corporate data. You have to rely on contracts and on cybersecurity, but if you're transacting, you're suddenly giving your data back to large conglomerates who control it, right? So New York Stock Exchange takes the data of what's happening on all the trading that's going on the exchange and they sell it to other people, right? That's valuable competitive intelligence. Wouldn't it be great to have more control over what's done with your corporate data? So shipping is another area I find really interesting, where again, Web3 allows for the control and the flow of goods to happen more seamlessly. So today, if you are moving goods on a ship, literally a boat from port to port. When you show up at the new port, you have to take a satchel full of documents and go down to the port admiral's office and go through documents all afternoon. They're trying to change that slowly with new rules around electronic information, but it's still fairly antiquated and not even digital. And in the Web3 world, the data about what goods are on the ship, the fact that some of those goods are subject to certain tax and some of those goods are not, all would be handled seamlessly and in a matter of minutes instead of spending hours and hours. And if you think about what happens in commerce around that ship, usually what you do if you're shipping goods from port to port is you finance that. You're paying interest on those goods as they travel. I used to manufacture in China and ship to Los Angeles. I had to pay interest until someone verified that my goods had arrived at the port and had transferred to somebody else. Now I gain back a day or two of interest on a 10-day loan with the benefit of that decentralized data where I now control the information rather than having, some third party controlling it.
Yeah, that part of ownership is also a lot about the personal data ownership. I remember, Anthony, you were also talking about ownership for machines, for example. Could you maybe dive into that example as well?
Yeah, so everybody kind of immediately jumps to personal use cases, right? Things that you can use with your phone, applications that you use today. But I can't remember the exact statistic, but is it 15 billion connected devices today, growing exponentially? So the number of devices in our world that are connected to the internet are growing very quickly. I don't think that's a surprise to everybody. But many of them today are sensor-based, right? So they're taking information in, temperature, weather. Smart vehicles are able to drive themselves, identify potholes in the road. Those are probably Web 2, right? They're interacting, but they're not really transacting. At the next level, you have 15 billion devices, or however many you get to, that are able to communicate with each other, that are able to trade with each other, vehicles that are able to exchange traffic information, vehicles that are able to exchange information with a weather service, that are able to exchange information with the government, sensors that are able to look at or inform crop information. And those can then connect to drones that may or may not go and do certain activities at that particular point of time. This is theoretical at this point. But the interesting thing is it's technically feasible today to have devices that are able to communicate with each other and settle instantly for the value they exchange. That's one of the important principles, I think, of Web3 is the ability to do borderless settlement or micropayments without banks in the way. If they can exchange dollar, euro, yen, doesn't matter what currency it's in, if they're able to exchange digitally, instantly, very small amounts of value for data that's exchanged, your car, your house, your farm, your sensor array can make value for you instantly without any intermediation of humans. And that becomes another way of creating value, new business models based on data and sensors that is fully automated. And that can be very, very powerful. So that's the machine economy that I think is super interesting. And again, people pay for sensor data today. We pay for weather data. We have subscriptions to weather services that give you the radar data as opposed to just the forecast today. Right? That's the dumb version of what can actually be hyper-precise, very sophisticated information that businesses or other machines that are autonomous will pay a good amount of money to be able to understand. So it's not just about setting up solar panels now to create value. It's about setting up sensors too. Hope that helps elaborate.
Yeah, that helps. So we talked about private data, machine data, and you mentioned in your talk that it is also transforming society. Are there certain aspects or a specific area where the impact will be most for society?
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious one to me starts in health. Right? So I talked earlier about the challenges of moving my personal health record around, but the potential for Web3 and Metaverse goes well beyond just data portability. So, for example, complex surgeries involve large medical teams. And usually they have to rehearse the surgery before they actually conduct it because they want to make sure that they get it right, particularly if it's brain surgery. And so just a couple of years ago, for the first time ever, a major brain surgery was rehearsed in the Metaverse. So there were a pair of co-joined twins. They were joined at the head. They were in Brazil. The expert surgeons were in London. And instead of flying 100 people on the medical team back and forth for the rehearsal, so normally what they used to do is they would scan the brain, Then they would create a 3D printed model of the brain, and then they'd practice the surgery physically in the surgical theater using the same instruments on the 3D model. This surgery was rehearsed entirely in virtual reality. It was done entirely in the metaverse. Medical teams in both countries came together virtually and were able to rehearse the surgery. It was successful. The twins were separated. They're doing great. The next step beyond that would be, in the future, not only could you rehearse the surgery in the metaverse, but you also could have your medical record be portable so the physician could instantly get it and be able to review it to be able to understand your condition. Taking it a step further, we now can have not just seamless money, but seamless expertise. So a nurse at a bush clinic in sub-Saharan Africa could consult, not just consult with a physician at Imperial College in London, but even be walked through a procedure in real time using a mix of virtual and augmented reality technology, and have the medical information on hand to be able to conduct that procedure. So we are very close to, this is within 3 years of being able to deliver that kind of seamless connectivity of information and expertise through a digital platform. And it's really exciting. Another area which we're looking at is parametric insurance, disaster insurance. So today, if there is a flood in Ghana, it might, and you've got a farmer, they lose their crop, they could have a $500 US claim. Let's say €500 claim. Today, it could take a year or two for them to get the money to replant and rebuild their crop. But with a Web3 world, the risk could be aggregated through a blockchain system with a smart contract attached. Artificial intelligence tied to sensor data from satellites could say, yes, this field was wiped out by this flood, and the digital wallet could pay the farmer in a day instead of a year. So there's a chance to dramatically transform the lives of people in developing countries who today don't have access to the same sort of relatively rapid sort of insurance payouts that we get in G7 countries.
Yeah, so those were some of the societal implications, and they're massive. Anthony, do you have some more economic kind of implications, how this will act in the future? And kind of what are the big unsolved problems that could solve?
Yeah, let me bridge into that with maybe, this is a VC audience, right? So the economic implications for entrepreneurs. So it is technically possible today for a 16-year-old to create a few lines of code that represent an application, a decentralized finance application, an ability to lend and borrow different digital assets, move money from one place to another, and publish that onto a decentralized blockchain for less than $100. We talk about the internet and Wi-Fi reducing the cost or democratizing access to innovation. The cost of being a startup today has much reduced compared to how it was 10 years ago, right? The cost previously was probably the telephone bill or the electricity bill or the cost of bandwidth has dramatically reduced. The ability for an entrepreneur today, or anybody of any age, to publish a line of code, to attract funding, finance, value. Right? A particular DeFi application could be processing billions of dollars of transactions. $40 billion of crypto is exchanged every day. Right? So that 16-year-old has published a decentralized finance application, has received billions of dollars in funding or revenue, and is then able to move that money around borderlessly, globally, instantly, to anywhere that they choose to, by using decentralized exchanges to move whichever cryptocurrency or whichever value they receive into Tether or Circle or any other US dollar-based cryptocurrency, and then have billions of dollars to be able to move around, to apply that capital, to invest that capital, to do whatever they want, instantly. Right? In terms of democratizing access to innovation, democratizing access to being a startup, to be able to have a cap table. Everything that a venture capital does could be made on chain. And so that company's entire shareholding agreement, having a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, essentially digital governance around some of the decisions that that company makes with its treasury. All of these things can be digitized and automated today and deployed by a 16-year-old. Now that's an opportunity for both lawyers and tax specialists, for one, but also for entrepreneurs. So the economic implications of that, the lowering the barriers to entrepreneurs, addressing a global audience instantly. I'm not saying that doesn't come with regulatory challenges. I'm not saying it doesn't come with tax challenges and legal challenges at the same time. But again, I think that's hugely profound. Another statistic I'll give you is BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, estimated that something in the order of $16 trillion of assets, be those equities, property, physical assets, new asset classes, are able to be tokenized. Tokenized is in represented digitally on a decentralized ledger, on a blockchain, and to allow efficiencies, greater efficiencies to move for those assets, for them to be able to be traded faster, for them to be able to be fractionalized so that they can attract more liquidity, for them to be able to be traded borderlessly, 24/7, without intermediaries, without having to go through a series of sequential processes to move from one owner to another. 16 trillion, or about the equivalent of, I think, about 10% of global GDP, could be made liquid, digital, and incredibly fast-moving. That is an incredibly profound opportunity for businesses to transform. The interesting thing for me is how many businesses or how many corporates are going to resist or to push back against that, right? The speed of change, the speed of transformation is not going to be led by, or not going to be hindered by the technology. It's actually going to be hindered by the digital transformation and the speed at which companies are willing to embrace that opportunity or change, or whether there are gatekeepers to retail or B2B users of accessing that technology. That's probably another thing that people maybe don't acknowledge about Web3 is many of the use cases we talk about today are technically feasible. What gets in the way in some cases is regulation, understandably. But what also gets in the way is the current view of the way capitalism works doesn't always mesh with decentralization, making things borderless and global, and liquidity moving around freely. Right? A lot of people make a lot of money from the system not being that way. And so we have some challenges on our hands in transforming.
Yeah, I definitely like examples, and the more I think we go through, the better it is for everyone to understand the wideness of this topic, and so tackling it from different sides. Can you make it maybe concrete again, especially for the audience? How will the future of Web3 impact everyone in this room? Is there like a concrete example you can think of?
Yeah, well, I mean, the cost of your financial services will get less expensive. And it's both through sort of easier access to competition on the front end, but also reduced costs on the back end. So think about this. How many of you move money across countries from euro to something else? Okay. So every day there is $10 trillion US of trapped liquidity in cross-border money transfer. $10 trillion because it takes roughly 3 days on average for these banks to really fully settle all of the transactions. That's float that the big financial institutions get to enjoy with your money. That creates friction, which introduces costs. DeFi, seconds or minutes, and you get back the use of your money. Or the other party on the other side of the transaction gets back the use of the money. It's not sucked up and used by these large institutions.
Yeah, let's maybe stay with you, David. Now we talked about the opportunities. Are there, what are the challenges? Why this seems so too good to be true? Where are kind of the roadblocks?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Anthony hit it on the head by saying there are a lot of vested interests who make a lot of money out of the way things are done today. You can bet that Western Union fought hard on remittances. They were making 15% money transfer fees to move money into Kenya. Today, that costs 0.1% when you use a decentralized finance-based transaction layer instead of 15%. A 2 order of magnitude improvement on fees, they fought that tooth and nail. They fight it in regulation, they fight it competitively, they fight it really hard. So you have a lot of incumbent interests. There's also sort of a user education component, just teaching people that, your money is actually more secure this way than the old way of creating a centralized single point of failure for attack. right?
Do you have anything to add for?
Yeah, let me come in with some brands or some names, because at a headline level, there were probably, I think, over 300 Fortune 500, FTSE 100, large listed companies that deployed some sort of smart contract or use a blockchain and tokens of some kind in the last 12 months to demonstrate a product, a feature, a benefit, an improvement. All right, so anybody who is part of the Starbucks loyalty program will be using blockchain. Now, this is not saying you're getting crypto and you're not getting paid money, but this is the mundane benefit of blockchain, is the settlement and reconciliation between commercial partners underneath Starbucks' loyalty program.
I mean, it's a money-like currency, right? It's Starbucks bucks.
Indeed, exactly right. So they've created a digital currency in and of itself, right? Every gaming token, every loyalty point is essentially a digital currency. We've had digital currency since, I think it was 1931, the Vir digital currency in Switzerland that was used as a cooperative currency between farmers. Right, we've had this concept. The fact is that it wasn't cryptographically managed, and it wasn't distributed on a ledger with a bunch of nodes, but underneath that requires settlement and reconciliation. Shared ledgers are very good for settlement and reconciliation, understanding what is the current balance of what's happening right now. Right? So anybody who's using Starbucks loyalty program, blockchain is being used as part of that technology stack. It's not a metaverse yet, but it probably will be. Anybody, a bad example, I'm in Germany, but anybody who owns a Renault car, right? Probably none of you, I suspect, German cars are better. But if you do, the supply chain for Renault is underpinned by a program called Exceed, in which the compliance requirements and compliance attestations of all of the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh tier of suppliers is aggregated up so that Renault can see the sub-assemblies and the different components have met compliance standards. If they had to physically or manually source all of that data into the middle, analyze it, evaluate it, and then submit to the regulator, they would be spending billions of dollars on having to manage that compliance. Today, it's managed by a distributed ledger with automation and checking that takes away that cost. Right? That's quite significant. Ticketmaster will probably be using blockchain or NFT, non-fungible token, the proof of ownership on a blockchain, to allow for tickets to be able to move between parties or even between exchanges in a trusted way to reduce the risk of fraud. Right? These are some examples. I do have a German example for you. Porsche. So Porsche, and this is an exciting one because this is not the mundane improving efficiency in an existing business model. This is creating new business models. So at the turn of last year, Porsche, I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but never mind, released a digital art project, or a digital loyalty project, you should probably call it, where they issued 3,000, I think, ownership tickets. Let's call them those. They were NFTs, ownership tickets, to be part of a new digital business where they could experience receiving digital products from Porsche, membership to certain events, the ability to engage with Porsche as a brand in different ways. It was an experience. They were trying to raise, I think, about $11 million upfront, prepaid, to create a fully digital business. 0 cars involved. Right? Some of the experiences involved cars, but they didn't sell a single car. They actually raised about $4 million. They didn't achieve as much as they wanted to, and there are some learnings in that we can talk after the show. I can talk more about why I think it was a success and a failure. They crowdfunded $4 million worth of capital to fund a fully digital business that's completely separate to the way that they typically make money today. Right? That exists today. You can go and buy one of those membership tickets. It comes in the form of a digital 911, and that allows you access to different experiences to be able to then pay for other things or to buy other products from Porsche, and that's a new business model that they run today. Exists. It's mostly over 40s men from Germany in this community, but it is a community that they've been able to monetize. And many other brands are looking at this the same way, as the ability to create new experiences, new products to monetize. You talked about the gaming example. Someone paying $3,000 for a digital spaceship. That may sound crazy to you guys, right? But what if that digital spaceship actually was able to return money? The content creators who are making content for people to watch on the internet, who are funded by advertising, would happily pay $3,000 for that spaceship if they could create 5 hours of YouTube content that's watched by 1 million people, because they're going to make much more in ad revenue or view revenue from spending that $3,000 up front. And so when you think about the metaverse, don't just think about it being this sort of VR space. There is value created by content creators every day who spend thousands of dollars to gaming companies to get ahead, to buy spaceships, to buy packs, to buy upgrades that they can then use in content they create and monetize through their audience of millions of people watching. Right? And these things can be purchased, moved, exchanged, verified on a distributed ledger. It's not gated by YouTube. It's not gated by Twitch. This is happening today.
Just a quick check in between. Does anyone have a question?
So many questions.
We got one in the back there, and one in the front.
Maybe wait for the microphone to come. Or Lars, go first.
Thank you, very interesting. We were talking about applications and the decentralized layers. Looking at the technology core, the silicon, Web 2.0 is running on Intel, Samsung, and so on and so forth. What are you expecting to come on the silicon side, on the silicon layer? Are you expecting different companies, different chipsets, or is it just the application side you are?
Do you want to have a first go at this, because we were talking about this just before, right?
No, I mean, I think it's still going to be a lot of the incumbent silicon manufacturers, largely because they benefit from scale economies. Where they make is going to change due to geopolitical reasons. So right now, Taiwan is a major. A lot of manufacturing has moved from mainland China to Taiwan. Now people are looking at national security and questions like, there is a large semiconductor plant in Malta. Maybe we should make more chips for Europe inside the EU. The US has put a lot of money into setting up more homegrown chip building capacity, but it's still going to be Intel and NVIDIA and a handful of other companies sort of selling you those chips. Anthony was referring to the fact that I have a SPAC that is just finishing its merger into a green or hydropower Bitcoin mining company, and we buy a lot of our chips from Intel.
Unfortunately, it's quite difficult to democratize hardware.
Yeah. The design investment is huge. Yeah.
There was another question up front here. Sayed, maybe you can pass the microphone.
Institutions, there's this interesting question for me too. I used to be at Bitcoin Swiss, and we would think about this a lot, also like the place of the company in particular. And a good example would be, I guess, Tether. It removes an incredible amount of friction, but still there's an institution at the core that actually guarantees that it's redeemable. And I think you can extend that to say the Swiss innovations in the digital ledger technology law is again backed by now a law that will ensure that, say, tokenized companies or shares are actually enforceable in the court, and then things like tokenization of real estate and so on is of course always the question is where the rubber hits the road. So the question is, what place do you see of institutions that are not trying to basically hold back the innovation, but actually are applying a lot of capital to build very solid foundations and basically on and off ramps so that these derivative tokenized and Web3 technologies can actually flow much more freely? And do you think they have a place, or is it just a technology type of innovation going on?
I think my view of Web3 is that it's technology capabilities that can be applied to human problems. There is always going to be the physical world. There is always going to be national borders and boundaries. The fact that I can send a Bitcoin to somebody in Mozambique today doesn't remove the fact that they are in Mozambique. They probably pay taxes there. They have to comply with local laws. And that's always going to be the case. The frustration, I think, in a number of cases, particularly if you're American right now, is the speed at which regulatory change or the way that the law or taxation recognizes the changes you're making to the system. I don't think that ever goes away. And unfortunately, that is going to be a limit on the progress we can make in certain settings. I would never advocate to say, well, we can do it in Web3 in the Metaverse, so we'll just skip the government and just not pay taxes because, I still go out there and I receive the benefit of roads. I still go out there and receive the safety of a police force. I still go out there and receive the benefit of national security. I still pay for electricity and utilities and so on and so forth. I think we need to find a harmonious way of allowing for, we have borderless commerce today. It's just intermediated by banks and it's slow and it's a bit crap sometimes, right? We can do better. And I think countries where maybe they have less national interest to protect or legacy industries to protect, where they can move faster, you'll see movement of talent, capital, and ideas. So the UAE, for example, right now is attracting significant amounts. Switzerland, great example, has, I think, over 1,000 Web3 companies based in Crypto Valley right now, maybe more. That's huge. Of the 21,000, 1,000 of those based in Switzerland, that's a big deal. I suspect it's probably more than that. That's why I think Web3 is a huge opportunity for lobbyists, lawyers, and tax people. It's a digital transformation problem as much as it is a technology innovation problem.
And just to kind of come at the institution question from the competition angle, Web3 enables new competition, right? So I'm glad you mentioned Ticketmaster. I would be remiss if I did not mention one of our portfolio companies is called True Tickets, and they're building an alternative to Ticketmaster. And they've been signing up lots of venue owners all over North America because the live venue owners hate Ticketmaster, but they didn't have a choice before Web3 came along. Now they've got an alternative system that's blockchain-based that reduces ticketing fraud, which is a big problem. When Miley Cyrus comes to town, those tickets get scalped and counterfeited in minutes. And it's a big, like tens of billions of dollars per year issue. And so now you've got a solution to this that's more secure and also allows one set of institutions, the venue owners, to break the monopoly that Ticketmaster holds over ticketing and ticketing fees. And so their launch was at the Tanglewood Music Festival in Massachusetts. Tanglewood is a major music festival. And it was the first time they had come back after COVID. And so there was a huge rush of demand. People show up at Tanglewood, and the conventional ticketing system did not work for 4 hours. The only way to get in that venue was if you had your mobile phone with the app from True Tickets. Because it was decentralized and more resilient, you didn't have that point of failure from the centralized ticketing system. So yeah, it might not be that we're going to have 10,000 competitors now entering a market, but now instead of 5 oligopolists, 30 or 50 other companies can come in and compete with them, and that's good for businesses and consumers because it'll reduce prices and improve service.
I saw one more question there and there, maybe as a last one then.
Chris Neisert, what about the environmental impact of the proliferation of Web3? I mean, if you want individual cars communicating with each other, you need a huge increase in in small data centers, and as a result, in an enormous increase in energy requirements. What about that?
Would it happen anyway? So whether we had decentralized networks or not, we still have the appification of everything today. We still have internets and cloud servers and communication between devices. We're still using telecommunications to transfer. I would argue that the serverification of everything is inevitable. What we have as a responsibility, and David, you may have another line on this one as well, is to be able to optimize for what we have, right? How many server farms today are operating at 10-20% efficiency, right? We can, if we have a decentralized network rather than very specific client-server relationships, a decentralized network can probably be optimized. If you look at some of the decentralized storage providers like Arweave or Storage or even IPFS, they're able to use excess storage capacity on servers around the world that's otherwise going unused. So the ability to fractionalize and decentralize capability will add some optimization, but it's not going to remove the need that we have more demand. But I suspect that that's there anyway. David?
Yeah. I mean, there are 92 microprocessors on your modern car today. And everyone in that car already has this. And so the idea that we'll get more out of those processors and have them talk to each other directly, I don't think dramatically changes the carbon footprint of that car that already has 92 processors on it. It's also worth noting that there's still a lot of latent power floating around out there. So, for example, hydro, the river is flowing over the dam, whether it's a peak period of demand or not. But what you do with that power when it's off peak, because you have to build your dam to support like a multiple of peak demand. So, demand goes like this throughout the day. You have to be there to support the peaks. What happens to all that electricity when there isn't a lot of demand? Today, it's wasted because there isn't really a good way to transmit it or store it. But what if we use that for compute? That becomes now a more efficient use of that resource. And finally, there's been a lot of attention paid to trying to reduce the carbon footprint of the algorithms. So having more efficient algorithms moving from proof of work to proof of stake. And that is another way that the industry is addressing this issue of energy consumption and sort of environmental impact.
Thanks. So last question.
Okay, hey. My question is also focusing on the unused hardware components. I also don't think that NVIDIA or Intel will go away overnight, but do you think that the already mentioned decentralized storage or GPU rendering or whatsoever components that are already out there are ready for prime time? Also, when you take a look at the convergence between AI and crypto or blockchain, because AI will probably also kind of like demand more of these decentralized storages. And as you have already mentioned, there are abundant sources out there. It's just the question, is the technology and these networks, are they already there for prime time, or is it kind of like just in the development stage?
That's a really good question. In my view, in terms of technical robustness, in terms of the commercial model, in terms of the resilience of the systems and the ability to integrate with applications where you're consuming or purchasing that capacity, absolutely. We've been ready for prime time for about 5 years. The lag is actually the integrations or the transformation. So you framed it really nicely in terms of, I think, increasingly we will democratize access to compute, democratize access to servers, democratize access because it's necessary, because it becomes too costly not to, or because somebody can see a business opportunity and the cost to create or to plug in a decentralized network with its own cryptocurrency that can transact autonomously between servers. We have that capability, it's just somebody didn't make a business out of it yet. It won't be long, possibly before Amazon or Google or Oracle has their own version of a decentralized storage business. They're already investing in them. They know it's coming. It's just their existing business model today is too profitable, and the volumes going through decentralized today are not sufficient for them to really be looking at it saying, we're going to pivot. They're going to milk that cash cow as long as they can, because that's their commercial incentive, until they become disintermediated by somebody else who can do it better.
And don't forget, we've had decentralized compute from before we had blockchain and before we had cloud. Does everyone remember SETI at home? This was the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, S-E-T-I, and they needed, they were underfunded, so they needed to do a lot of computation on imagery from telescopes. So your PC sitting on your desktop, when it was idle, could run compute to try and find extraterrestrial. This is like early aughts, late 90s. We've had this decentralized compute capability for a long time, so we're coming out of the end of 3 decades of R&D, rather than like this is something new that is just getting created.
We had Napster before we had Arweave. We were sharing data with torrents. Now we weren't paying anybody for it. We were just sharing illegal stuff over the internet.
But the technology was there.
The technology existed, the protocols existed, and now you can layer an automated commercial system underneath it, which allows it to be commercially viable and grow.
Great. So last question.
Yes.
Is this working? Yeah. I haven't heard the word KI today yet, and it's become a major development in the world of media and entertainment. Is there anything? Where does this come in?
KI is it's the German
IP?
the German word for AI.
Oh, AI.
It's, so it's in German it's künstliche Intelligenz. In English it's artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So that has a huge impact in terms of
Everything.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so that demo I showed you of the little characters, that was all artificial intelligence. The convergence opportunity is huge. So if you think about what's exciting, you take data, which used to be in these central servers, and now you make it more portable and movable. Now we put intelligence around that data. That data gets more useful and more valuable. The code can travel with some AI that tells you what it can do, what it can't do, how it plays well with other data. And so that opens up a whole world of possibilities in everything from money to health to new business models to you name it. Even down to the level of, we saw this strike in Hollywood, right, with the actors and writers. They were striking about the use of artificial intelligence to basically make them obsolete. And one of the issues is, if you strike a new deal with them around streaming media and other kinds of media, how do you pay them? It turns out that, sort of bringing together, Web3 technologies can help with the transfer of payments, but AI can also be used to audit those payments. So the actors know, yes, my face appeared in that character in that movie, so I should get, 5 centimes of payment royalty for that use of my face in a crowd scene.
So we've talked. Oh, sorry, you wanted to add something?
Go ahead, it's fine.
We've talked so much, tackled Web3 from all different areas. Maybe as a last question from me, what do you want the audience to take away from, if you have one thing?
Firstly, I'm amused that on a Web3 panel we didn't talk about artificial intelligence enough. I feel like that's a sign of the times, is that everybody else is interested in artificial intelligence and we're spending too much time thinking about Web3. But I think what I'd like people to think about Web3 is just to come back to the core digital transformation principles. Right? It is a technology set just like any other. It is somewhat different in its nature because it is decentralized. But all the same reasons why Web3 will succeed or why decentralized applications will succeed is the same reason why cloud would have succeeded or artificial intelligence will have succeeded. Everything is technically feasible up until the point where it comes to a business case. And if there's not a business case for change, or if there is a strong opponent to that change won't happen. And so the difference between blockchain could and blockchain is, or we might do this in the metaverse versus we are doing this in the metaverse, still comes down to the same digital transformation principles. And the reason why a lot of the businesses or the startups have not been successful using Web3 technology is because they've become enamored by the features the technology can provide or the philosophy that Web3 offers that's different. But as the colleague at the front here said before, we still live in a physical world where we have governments and borders, and that's not going away anytime soon. So those rules haven't changed. So as you look at companies or you evaluate technology, just spend time thinking about, is the business model there as well? Try not to get razzle-dazzled by the tokenization of everything, but to remember that the same principles for change apply, but that they can move faster now because we have technology that allows us to further democratize what's possible.
And my comment would be, think about what problem needs to be solved, right? So I haven't dwelled on AI, although my next book in January is on AI. Spending a lot of time thinking about AI. But,
will it be written by an AI?
But well, I actually write my own books. But there are a lot of people who write terrible books using AI. This is true. But what problem is being solved? And I get excited because a lot of the most interesting solutions are at at convergence. The intersection of Web3 and AI creates really interesting solutions to problems that we couldn't solve before. And so when you're evaluating an investment opportunity, you're looking at a portfolio of opportunities, you're thinking about a business, what problem is being solved, and how does Web3 or AI help you or not help you solve that problem?
Perfect. Thanks so much for this great panel. We have one panel which is between now and lunch. So give a great thank you and applause to David and Anthony.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.